Opposition parties in Israel are uniting in an effort that could oust the nation's longtime leader, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The head of the right-wing opposition party, Naftali Bennett, announced Sunday a power-sharing agreement with the leader of the centrist party, Yair Lapid, in order to form a new government. A party leader must secure support from 61-seat majority in parliament, and several other parties have already signed on. Bennett and Lapid have until Wednesday to cement the deal. Under the terms, each leader is expected to serve 2 years as prime minister, starting with Bennett. It would mark the end of an era for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's been in power for 12 years, but has failed to form a working government after several attempts. He is also facing corruption charges. Joining us now is the New York Times' David Halbfinger. He is a former bureau chief for the Times' Jerusalem bureau. David, good to have you here. So I just want to start off by getting a reality check, because predictions of Netanyahu's political demise have been floating for years, but he always seems to come back. How certain are you that this deal will actually go through?
Well, you never say never with Bibi Netanyahu. They call him the magician in Israel for a reason. He always seems to find some rabbit in some hat somewhere. But this time, it's looking like it's game and like it's ball game. There's a few days in which it'll take for this process to play out, and everybody's bracing for the deluge, the avalanche, the phone calls, the threats, the accusations, the manipulation and cajoling that he's done again and again to hang on to power. But at this point, there's a solid group of people who. Of leaders, and some of them, former proteges of his, including Bennett, who really have decided that, for years, Netanyahu won power and kept winning elections and kept holding on to power by persuading a majority of Israelis that only he could really keep them safe, that he was indispensable as a leader. But now this group of people is getting together, and they're making the argument that really what's indispensable to Israel's future, to its safety, to its coherence and cohesion as a nation, that Netanyahu has been really dividing for quite some time, is that he go. That's what's indispensable now. Well,
tell us about the likely incoming prime minister, who is Naftali Bennett. What do you expect him to focus on when he takes the reins? And I also thought it's particularly interesting, given that he has a relationship with Bibi, having served previously as his chief of staff, that he should be the one to unseat him.
Yeah, so Naftali Bennett's a very compelling figure. He's very right-wing, compared to Netanyahu, I think, which is making the people who've wanted Netanyahu gone take some pause. Be careful what you wish for; you just might get it. He's a tech entrepreneur. He made scores of millions of dollars in tech. Before that, he had been a commando in the Israeli army. He served in Lebanon. He's an impressive guy and a very astute political figure and political operator. He learned a lot of that, I think, working under Netanyahu. But like several of the other people who are involved in this effort to depose Netanyahu, Naftali Bennett learned the hard way that Netanyahu is not somebody you want to have necessarily as your mentor, at least not for very long. Netanyahu is notorious in Israel for taking talented politicians under his wing only to really destroy their careers. He's done that to people a lot older and more experienced than Bennett. But along with Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, a partner of his and his party, who are ganging up on Netanyahu, she's another former protege of Bennett's. Both were run out of Netanyahu's circle by Netanyahu and his wife, actually. There's also key help being provided by Avigdor Lieberman, a former foreign minister, and another former right-hand man to Netanyahu earlier on. This is a guy who basically got fed up and has made it his mission for a couple of years now to be part of one of the instruments of his demise. It's a little bit Shakespearean how these guys are all ganging up kind of on the steps of the Roman Senate. The other irony I just wanted to point out is, a key factor in this toppling of Netanyahu, if it comes to pass, is a small Arab party. And I'm sure you'll remember that until recently, Netanyahu was known, really, he was notorious for this too, for demonizing Arab voters and Arab politicians, and for making it seem like a cardinal sin for a Jewish politician or to even imagine including Arab lawmakers in a governing coalition. But when Netanyahu's own legal troubles made it look as though he wouldn't be able to form a coalition without the Arabs, he suddenly changed his tune a few months ago and started courting this small Arab party himself. And in doing that, he effectively made it kosher, if you will, for others to do the same. And now that small Arab party has thrown in its support to the anti-Netanyahu group. In a lot of ways, you could say that the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah, when you describe it as Shakespearean, one of my first thoughts was et tu, Bennett, because it is really interesting how the politics all came into play there. How did opposition parties settle on Bennett to lead the government? And I'm also wondering, what does this mean about the future of Benny Gantz?
What future of Benny Gantz? Gantz is going to stick around. They need his defense expertise. That he'll be the defense minister in this next government. But he disappointed the anti-Netanyahu forces greatly by first offering himself up as the champion to take down Netanyahu, nearly managing to pull it off at the ballot box, and then in the end, going in with him in a very ill-fated and short-lived coalition. It was really just like a betrayal of the anti-Netanyahu vote. I forgot what the first part of your question was. Sorry.
Oh, the other question was really how did the opposition leaders really settle on Bennett as a person likely to succeed?
Really, he was like the kingmaker in this. He has a small party. I think he only has 7 seats in parliament. But really, the way you put together a government is you kind of get the spectrum in order, and if you're a center-left politician like Yair Lapid is, naturally, I think, you only go as far to the right as you have to, and then you hope that you can put that coalition together and get to 61. He couldn't get there without Bennett. And, Bennett had all that leverage. And so really the price of Bennett's participation was that despite his puny party in the parliament, he's going to be leading the government for the next couple of years, assuming this plays out. So, yeah, that was a lot of leverage, and Bennett really worked it.
David, for a lot of our viewers, obviously they've been watching what has transpired over in Gaza, and right afterwards there were conversations about how the fighting between Israel and Hamas may be affecting Bibi politically. How much of an impact did it have on this decision and this likely coalition, I should say? And what sort of hardline stance do you expect, given Bennett's right-wing leanings, to take when it comes to dealing with the Palestinians?
So first, I think you're right. Many people did think that the fighting could help Netanyahu, and it did, for a little while. I mean, the fighting really broke out as Lapid and Bennett were on the cusp of announcing what we're going to see this week. It appears this very same kind of a deal, and it delayed them, but it only delayed them by a couple of weeks, and quite a lot of bloodshed. But, the fighting also highlighted, I think, to Israelis and certainly to the people looking to end Netanyahu's tenure, how little he has really done, especially in recent years, to change things or to make the country more secure vis-a-vis Gaza over the years. And, how he's actually bolstered Hamas in its control over Gaza by allowing money to flow into Gaza in recent years to buy quiet. And again, when the quiet gives way to an eruption like this, everybody starts to question, well, is he really Mr. Security, as he tells us? Is this really working? As for the Palestinians, I think, Bennett is, he's not like a touchy-feely guy when it comes to the Palestinians. He's somebody who believes in annexing the West Bank, not just, expanding settlements. He wants to make it part of, he believes his ideology is, it should be Israeli from the river to the sea. So, we should be under no illusions about where he stands on that. However, it's important to note that Lapid who's got more votes in this, and is his rotation partner as prime minister, is a two-stater. And this is an area where you'd have to expect this coalition to try to keep things quiet and keep things the way they are when it comes to dealing with Palestinians. Now, events have a way of failing to go along with that kind of program. And you have to wonder if this coalition is really going to have much chance of survival for all 4 years, or even for the 2 years until Lapid can take over as prime minister. But I think a lot of Israelis don't really care about those kinds of details at this point. More than half the country wants Netanyahu gone, and they figure they can sort things out from there once he is in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. Well, even if this deal goes through and he's out of power, Netanyahu, that is, he still is facing some serious legal problems. How might this change affect him on that front?
Well, let's just say that, many believe that the reason he was fighting, one of the big reasons why he was fighting to hold on power so tooth and nail, was because it's one thing to fight a criminal bribery and breach of trust and fraud charges on trial when you're the prime minister and you control really the justice system in a lot of ways. You control the police. Maybe you can appoint the next justice minister. Maybe you can figure out a way to get yourself a pardon or get the charges pulled. I mean, these are all or you can even pass a law that basically retroactively makes it impossible in Israel, there's no constitution. You can pass any kind of law that you want to do basically anything. And people are expecting Netanyahu to try that if he got the votes. So, it's a far cry between, standing trial as prime minister with all those options to try to get himself out of legal jeopardy, and being a former prime minister without those levers of power to pull. So, now you might expect it to become more likely, at least, that he would seek a plea deal, try to work out some deal for a pardon, or, something along those lines. But depending on the witness at trial, but the testimony. But the testimony so far has been pretty tough on Netanyahu, and it's going to play out for a long period of time, and it's going to be a tough battle for him to fight outside of the prime minister's office.
Yeah, well, this is certainly some very big foreign news. David Halbfinger, thank you so much for coming on and helping us to understand it.
Great to be with you. Thanks.